So they said, well, what do you know about Batman? I said, well, I know the Adam West show. And Bruce Timm goes, no, no, no. I said, we love Adam, but that's not what we're doing. He said, don't you know anything about the Dark Knight legacy? And I said, no, I don't know that. He could not believe that I was that stupid. So he had to explain to me. He said, you know, as a child, he witnessed his parents being murdered in front of him. He lives in a cave. He's dual identity. He's avenging their deaths. He's misunderstood by the world. I said, well, you know, you're telling a story that's been told 100 times. It's the Hamlet story. It's the story of Orestes. It's a classic tragic hero. And he said, well, no one's approached it from that angle before. And they'd been seeing hundreds of people. They'd seen over 500 people at that point, because they were casting this big new show, which I, of course, being an idiot, didn't know anything about. And so I said, well, let me just give it a shot. So I get in the booth and I put it in my imagination. And when you're in a booth, the wonderful thing about a sound booth is you're like in your own world. It's almost like a womb. It's very safe. I feel it's very freeing. It's the way I feel when I'm on stage. When I'm on stage, people always say, aren't you terrified to be on stage? And actually, I have the reverse feeling. When the lights go down on the audience, you can't see anything. It's just a sea of black. And then the lights come up on you. And when lights come up on me on stage, I actually feel warm. I get a rush of blood. And it's like I get a breath, and it's almost like breaking the surface for air to breathe coming out of the water. I come alive on stage, and I feel freer on stage than I do in real life with you. I'm much more comfortable being an asshole on stage than I am being one on the street. You know what I mean? I'm just more comfortable there. Where with 99% of people, it's the opposite. So anyway, that's the way I feel when I'm in a booth. When I'm in a sound booth, I just get that feeling that when I'm on stage, and it's very freeing. And I just feel like my imagination gets freed up. So I just put myself in the spot of this character, of this loss, of this child, and I try to imagine what that was like, and what that agony he goes through life with. And my voice just got deeper and darker, and I went to this very mysterious kind of husky, sexy place. And they hired me. They said, that's it, we got him. But it was a strange, and it was the first, it doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen that way. You don't go in for your first animated audition and nail it and have it be a role that becomes iconic and lasts for 27 years. That just, that's just the hand of fate entering your life. That just doesn't happen. But I've been supporting myself since I was 17 as an actor. I've been living in New York. I got a full scholarship to Juilliard. I've been on my own. And I've been training as an actor since then. So the fact that this happened wasn't an accident. I've been preparing for it for a long time. It just wasn't the way most people would have prepared for it. It's not what you would think about doing. I was just coming at it from a real angle. But for that character, think about it, Batman. He's a tragic hero. He's the Dark Knight. He's epic. He's bigger than life. He is a classic hero. He could have come right out of a Greek play. He's right out of a Shakespeare play. So in that sense, everything I had been trained for up until then was absolutely perfect. It was preparing me, but it would have been terrible for any other role. You know what I mean? It was perfect for that role. So that's how I came at it. So it was a unique way of coming at it.
Yeah. And you talked about Bruce Wayne is more similar to your own speaking voice.
Yeah.
And Batman's a little bit more of
Well, that was the other thing. When Bruce was explaining to me the character, I said, wait a minute. He's the richest guy in Gotham. He's the most eligible bachelor. He's the handsomest. Everybody wants this guy, right? He puts on a mask and no one knows it's him? I said, seriously? I said, that's ridiculous. I said, I'm an actor, let me play with the voice a little bit. Let me make more of a clear character difference. Wouldn't that make sense? So he said, great. So I did, the Batman voice. But then I came up with a Bruce Wayne voice that have you ever heard of a movie, I think it's from the 40s or the 30s, called The Scarlet Pimpernel? It's a really great, if you haven't seen it, it's a great period movie. And Leslie Howard plays this English aristocrat who's like a Robin Hood character, fighting evil and everything. But the way he disguises himself is as a fop at the court. Everyone thinks he's this fool, this very fey kind of fool at the court. But at night, he becomes Robin Hood. So no one ever thinks it's him. So I thought, how cool is that? If Bruce Wayne is more of, not a fop, but like a social, the image I had in my mind was David Niven. A real ironic, sophisticated, with a lot of humor, and I gave him a lot of color, and there was a lot of upper register to the voice, and a lot of irony to the sound, and they loved it. But when the artwork came back, because in animation, you record the stories first, like radio plays. So all the actors were in a room together, and you all work together at Warner Brothers. The other studios don't work that way, but Warner Brothers likes that, which is great because it's like a play. And when I'm working with Mark, I'm better if he's better if I'm better. And we feed each other so much. And the cast they got in on this show, from Roddy McDowall to John Glover to Mark Hamill to Ron Perlman, I mean, it was just amazing. They got everybody on this show. So you had these wonderful actors in there, Michael Lancier, that you're working with these great actors, great character actors, and it just makes you better. They give you so much, you can't help but be better. You know what I mean? So that's the process where you do the record first. The actor's the first step. And then the recordings are sent off to the artists. And the artists paint to our recordings. A lot of people think it's the other way around. And then there's a process called ADR, where those paintings come back and they're synced up with the soundtrack. And there's always problems with the syncing. And to reconcile the two, it's called ADR, where you put in extra grunts and groans and extra mouth flaps and stuff like that. So it was a good 6 months between the original recordings and the first artwork that was coming back from the artist that was ready for ADR. So for those first 6 months, we were recording happily, and I was doing this very wry kind of David Niven-y kind of Bruce Wayne. And suddenly the artwork came back and it was so dark and so noir that Bruce Timm said, we love what you're doing with everything, but Bruce Wayne's way too funny. It just doesn't fit. So we want to keep him different, but we have to tone it down. So we went back and actually re-recorded the first, maybe 6 episodes or something, maybe 10 episodes, of just the Bruce Wayne voice. And they wanted it still distinct, but they said, tone it down, tone it down. So ultimately, he basically became me. The Bruce Wayne voice was just my voice. And then I would go into the Batman. And the other trick I found out about it was once I got into the character more and more, and I really fell in love with this character. The reason he so resonates with audiences, the reason he is so popular is because he has no superpowers. And he's the only superhero with no superpowers. And he's damaged. He is profoundly damaged. And everyone can relate to that. Everybody's damaged. Anyone who says they're not is either lying or is a fool. Because everyone has got baggage. Life is rough, And everyone has problems. Everyone has darkness. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has wounds from childhood. And his are so dramatic and so deep. And he could have gone to the dark side, but he chose not to. And he chose to make his life about doing good. And people loved that about him. And the more I got into the character, the more I researched him, the more I started appreciating how complex he was. The more I realized that the Batman identity is the real identity. Batman's not the mask. That's who he is because of what happened to him. That was how he reconciled himself to that damage from childhood. That's where he went to preserve his sanity. You know what I mean? So when I started approaching it that way, that voice, it didn't sound weird. It didn't sound imposed because to me, it was organically coming out of that experience. And the performance was when he puts on his suit and goes into Wayne Enterprises and is Bruce Wayne. That's the performance. And that's the way I've approached the character, and I know that it resonates with the audience. I know it does, because I just hear from you guys all the time how much Batman touched them. And I don't think that would be true if you sensed it was a performance. There's something very grounded and soulful about Batman that touches people. Even young children, they just sense something very genuine about that character. And that's what I love playing about him.
And yeah. Can you talk about the difference of recording for the show, the animated show, versus recording for the video game of the Arkham series?
Recording for the shows is why I became an actor. It's fun, it's interactive with the other actors. It's in 2 hours you do a half-an-hour show, and you're done, and you get all that. It's like Andrea said, watching you and Mark together is like watching two 8-year-olds in a playground together. You're just like yeah, it's just so much fun. And it's cathartic. You get all your demons out. You get to emotionally exercise when you're dealing with the other actors. Games, because of the way they're structured, they have to have each performance be completely clean. So you're alone. So you don't get any of that interaction with the other actors. And so you're isolated in a booth. You're trying to keep the character alive. You're keeping the situation alive in your head with no one feeding you anything. And you're doing each line in a vacuum. And they need multiple takes of each line depending on what they're going to want to edit when they're putting the game together. So they'll be like, okay, Kevin, you're telling Barbara Gordon to get out of a burning building. Get out, Barbara! Perfect. Now do it with a little more anger. Get out, Barbara! Great. Now keep the anger and put a little smile in it. I'm not kidding. Get out, Barbara! Perfect. And this goes on for 4 hours, alone. And then you get an hour's break for lunch, and then you do another 4 hours alone. Line after line after line after line after line. And occasionally Andrea would come on and go, I don't hear Batman anymore, you're not being Batman. Because you're like, I'm like, Batman? I'm trying to keep my sanity in here. I don't even know who Kevin is. Who the hell is Batman? It's really hard. It's not why you go to Juilliard. You know what I mean? They can't teach you this at Juilliard. And then Arkham Knight, the third part of the trilogy, which, look, I'm saying all this to give you an idea what it's like to build it. Obviously, I'm really proud to be a part of them. They're incredible games. Once it's done and you see what you've done, you think, oh, yeah, I gave to that. That's my voice in there. I made that work. But the process is like, root canal. So Arkham Knight had, get ready, 157,000 lines of dialogue. It was like recording War and Peace. It took 2 years just to record. The reason they did Arkham Origins, which was not part of the trilogy, I don't know if you, for those of you who know the game, without any of the actors from the trilogy, is because they wanted to keep the audience involved in the game while this massive game was being built, Arkham Knight. They didn't even tell us about Origins. I didn't even know about Origins. I was asked about it in a panel. Oh, are you in the next Arkham game? And I said, has that been announced? And they said, oh yeah, that's been announced. I said, well yeah, I am in the next Arkham game. They said, oh, that's so cool, Arkham Origins. And I went, Arkham what? And then they said, which game are you talking about? And then I got a call from Warner Brothers. I'm not kidding. From a vice president at Warner Brothers, saying you are in serious breach of contract. And you have let something out of the bag, and you are forbidden to ever go to a Comic-Con again. I said, do you know how much I promote this character? Do you know how much free publicity I give you guys? I love going to the Comic-Cons. So I fought with them for a while about it. I said, please, please. And they can't stop me, but they could stop using me. You know? That's the threat. So we reached a deal where, I'm not kidding, for a while they would send a minder from Warner Brothers. I said, am I in kindergarten? They would send a minder to watch me do panels like this. There'd be someone standing backstage. Yeah, it's like, You know, as soon as the question would go into some dangerous territory, you'd hear.
So we should get that man a water.
But, you know, so the games, it's a very interesting question, the difference between building them.
Yeah.
Because when it's done, you're so proud to have been a part of it. They're so beautiful, and I wish they would do another Arkham game. There's no rumors of that, but I really would wish they would.
One that you're aware of.
Yeah, exactly. Not that I'm aware of. But that's the difference.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time that we open up to audience questions at this time. So we've had some wonderful people lined up. We're going to go ahead and take questions one at a time, starting with you, sir. What's your name?
Rick.
Welcome.
Rick. I have two questions. You know, like one, like when you were doing Batman, Batman Beyond, was it a big surprise that you said
A big
that,
difference
like,
doing old Bruce Wayne?
Yeah.
Yeah. Old Bruce Wayne is 80. And they were coming up with different, ways to keep the stories going. And so they thought, Batman in the future, Batman in the past. Oh no, we'll do a new young Batman, and Kevin can be old Bruce Wayne. And I said, wait a minute. What happened to Kevin? I'm not that old. Hollywood. Bruce Timm goes, oh man. So, but then Will Friedle came in, and he's such a wonderful guy. And we had a really good working relationship, and it was fun. I found it was fun to, be old, crotchy Bruce Wayne. Damn it! McGinnis, get in here! But yeah, it was interesting, Suddenly, it's interesting when you're the center of the show, and suddenly you're not. As an actor, you're kind of given the stage to someone else, and it's humbling. And it was actually kind of fun. But I felt that way when I met Adam West the first time he came in for Grey Ghost. I grew up on this guy, and he's coming into a guest star on my show where I'm doing the role that he started, and I'm like, this is so awkward. They came in and I said, man, I'm such a fan. He said, oh, come on. He said, I had a great time doing it. You'll have a great time doing it. He said, it's yours to run with now. Have a blast. He said, it's great. And he just couldn't have been cooler about it. I loved him. I loved him. He was such a gentleman, and he was wonderful as the Grey Ghost. So yes.
And you said you had another?
Yeah, another question. Yeah, like when the show The Batman was on and you were on Bruce, what did you do on that time? Around that year? Yeah, when that show The Batman was on, yeah.
The Batman?
Yeah, kind of WB Kid.
Oh, that was another actor.
Yeah, I know. Like, what do you did on?
He wasn't the real Batman. I was in New York doing theater, and so I wasn't in LA, and so they got another actor to do that job. That's what it comes down to. I split my time between New York and LA, just because I'm a New Yorker. I was raised in New York. I love the city, and theater is my roots. So I still, I go there a lot still.
So when WB had their Batman show, you were back in your hometown?
Exactly. That's how that happened. And then I started spending more time in LA, so they gave me Justice League Action, which was the most recent one we did. And then the Killing Joke and the Harley Quinn movie. They've been using me more and more now because I've been back in LA more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Hi.
Hey there. So that's actually a good segue into my question. So I stumbled a year ago on a video on YouTube in an article where
Always a dangerous start to a sentence.
I stumbled on an article that I discovered the late Bill Finger had a street renamed after him in New York City, and I saw in the video you actually got to be there for the dedication.
Oh yeah.
It made me wonder, for those who don't know, that was a very long uncredited co-creator of Batman.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, when did you first hear about him and hear about his story? Like, how did you first kind of come into contact with Bill Finger?
Well, I think probably like everyone else, I was really naive to his input until Mark Tyler Nobleman wrote that book and exposed the fact that this guy had co-created Batman and had really been denied his recognition his whole life. Bob Kane was the co-creator, he wasn't the only creator. And Mark Nobleman is the one who put all that back on the map. And he approached the city about it. It's a great story. It's a very, well, this is my New York pride coming through. It's a very New York-centric story. Think about it. It takes place in Gotham. It's everything about it is it's the dark, gritty streets of the 40s. These are two young, aspiring writers, struggling, two Jewish boys from the Bronx, who were really broke. And they came up with this idea for this crime-fighting character. And they used to meet in a park called Poe Park. It's named after Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe's home was in the Bronx. The Bronx, when my mother was a little girl growing up there, was quite beautiful. And it was like the suburbs. And Poe's house was there. And there's nothing left of the house, but the park is there named for him. So they used to go there and write together. It's a very tiny little triangle. But think about it, Batman, and what is Poe most remembered for? The Raven. The Raven. And so there's a resonance of Poe in a lot of that character, in the mystique of the character. And so Poe Park is now Bill Finger Way. After that book came out, well, the park is still Poe Park, but the intersection, the city named the intersection Bill Finger Way, as recognition of his co-creation of the show. So I was there for the dedication of that, and his granddaughter came up from Florida.
Stepson as well.
And his stepson. And it was really wonderful to have the city recognize this. And he died in poverty. He never got the recognition in his life. This son of New York, a very typical son of New York, and his creation. It was wonderful.
And related, do you have any like emotional memories for when you heard that he was finally getting not just a streak, but getting credited on Batman books when that came out in 2016?
Well, I was so honored to be involved in that event, the naming, that, you know, it was very early in the morning, on a cold morning, and it was in the middle of the Bronx, and I lived downtown in Manhattan, and I was wandering to an area of the Bronx I'd never been to before, you know, but I got there, because I wanted to just be there, because it was important. And I read, I don't know if those of you who are familiar with Death of a Salesman. It's a beautiful play by Arthur Miller. And there's a wonderful line in it. It's about Willie Loman, who's a salesman who spends his life. It's sort of an American tragedy. He's the unsung American hero, the guy who schleps coast to coast as a salesman to support his family, and no one ever really appreciates it. And his wife, at one point, has a beautiful line where it's the climax of the play, where she says, "Attention must be paid. Attention must be paid to such a man," and that such a life was lived. So I brought the play and I read that line because it seemed so perfect for Bill Finger, that the city was finally giving attention to him that he'd never gotten.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sure.
Evan?
Hi.
I was always curious about one thing is, you and Mark Hamill would always voice like Batman the Joker in the Batman animated series and every other show with featuring Batman and Joker, almost every other show. I was just curious, have you ever decided to switch roles just to see what it's like for Kevin Conroy to voice the Joker and Mark Hamill voicing Batman?
Betty. You're such a naughty, naughty boy. Yes, we do. And at the last Comic Con, someone asked me that, and I said, "Oh yeah, Mark and I do each other all the time." And the place went crazy. we do play around with lines like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along.
Hello, Kevin.
Hi.
I have a question for you to repeat something that you said in the animated series and also in Arkham Knight. And it was, in Arkham Knight, you said it in a very badass way, so I wanted to know if you can repeat, "I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman." It was awesome.
I've never heard that one.
You said it.
What is it again?
I am vengeance, I am the night.
I know. Irony is dead. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman! It never gets old.
Thank you.
Awesome,
Sure.
thank you. Yeah, right on up.
Thank you. Let's see, here's a question. If all the Batman become rebooted, which one of your Batman of the become the beginning back where Adam West, or modern, which is your the cable show, or the new future is a new one, which is
Which is my favorite Batman show?
the Batman series of a saga.
Which of the variations of different Batman series?
I'm biased just because it was the first one to Batman the Animated Series, because it was so beautifully done. A lot of you probably don't realize that it was a half-an-hour show, but it was originally designed for prime time on Fox. It was originally on at night. So that's why those stories are so adult. They were never writing for children. They knew it would have to appeal to children, so they were careful about violence and things like that. But the stories and the psychology of the characters was always very sophisticated. They were never talking down to the audience. And then the kind of money that was spent, because it's always about money, was doubled. They spent twice per half hour as had been previously spent. And I had a friend who worked at Disney, who was an executive, who called me right after the show aired in '92, and he said, "Damn you." And then all of it being painted on black, that had never been done before. So all the colors are so vibrant and rich. And then casts of like a dozen actors, I mean, big casts, and all really interesting actors. It was a lot of work that went into making those shows, and a lot of money. And that's why I think a lot, at the time, probably people thought it was an unwise investment, but now, 27 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
And when you look at them now, they look brand new. You know, they're timeless. There's something very timeless about them. And I think that's because of the quality of the work that was put in them to begin with. So that would be my favorite, for all those reasons. And I think the best Batman movie by far, of the live action or the animated, is Mask of the Phantasm. It's a great movie.
I met Bruce Timm last year of this Comic-Con. It's actually San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Great.
The last
Thank you.
I seen it was from Los Angeles convention from October 2014. That was the best panel one because old Batman, Robin, and the new one was I Seen Your from San Comic-Con.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Right here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Lawrence.
Hi, Lawrence.
Thanks for all the memories that were brought to me, and I hope Joker doesn't pop out of nowhere and start throwing you around or something. I don't know why.
Oh, Lawrence, you're such a scaredy cat.
So I knew at this point that, oh my goodness, the DC animated shows feels more organic. Feels like I'm watching like an adult, mature series. Like they took cues from like Japanese animation shows at the time. It was like, yeah. So do you have any memories of Adam West? If you do have a chance to rest in
With Adam, he was just a real gentleman. And everyone loved to work with him. And it was quite shocking when he died. I mean, it happened so suddenly for everybody. I had just worked with him briefly before that, a short time before that. We bumped into each other at Salt Lake Airport, because he lived in Utah somewhere, and he used to come into LA to work. And I had just done the Salt Lake Comic-Con or something like that. And we bumped into each other at Salt Lake Airport, and we were both waiting for flights. And we're sitting there talking to each other, and people started gathering around. And I realized, I said, you know, we should be selling tickets. And everyone kept coming up and saying, can we get our pictures with you? Can we get our picture? I was like, yeah, how much are you gonna pay? Just kidding, we didn't charge. But it was fun, because we realized, oh my God, we're the Batmen are here together. It was fun.
Yeah.
No, he was such a cool guy. He was a great guy.
I bet he's a swell dude.
Yeah. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for coming to the Bay Area.
Sure.
I have two questions. My first question is, Mark Hamill famously would laugh to work every day to get into character as the Joker. Did you do anything, behind the scenes to, get yourself into that role, like drinking a cup of scotch or something?
Well, yeah, I put on my tights. Well, it's an interesting question, because I think it's a misconception of a lot of people. They say, how do you get into voice acting? I want to get into voice. Listen to me do you. And they'll come up and they'll do a really good imitation of me. And I think, okay, now I have to kill you. Or they'll do a really good imitation of Mark, And I always have to tell people, once you've established a voice, imitating it is not that hard. It's coming up with it. It's creating it. It's having the idea. And that's what they're paying you for. And voice acting, there's a misconception that it's about doing funny voices or doing character voices. And that's only part of it. The base of it is acting. You're acting. You're creating a full, the reason Mark's Joker is so crazy brilliant is because it's not just that crazy guy. There's all those other colors in there too that you hear and you sense. He goes from A to Z in emotions in a minute, and it's his bipolar quality that is so scary. But he created that, and voice acting is creating a full flesh character, but you only have your voice to do it with. And I've seen so many. It's called stunt casting in LA, where they hire a film star or a TV star because of the name recognition, and they'll bring them in to do a voice, and it sells the show. It's called stunt casting. Unfortunately, it means that a really good actor who usually does voices isn't going to get that role. So that's happening more and more. It happens a lot now, actually. But I've seen where some actors are great at it, but if you're really accustomed to being on camera and having the camera, when you're on camera, the camera does a lot of the work for you. And a lot of the trick is doing less so that the camera does it. That's part of the trick of acting on camera. And knowing what the camera's going to do. On voice work, you don't have that. But if you try to compensate for that in a really obvious way, then it sounds like it's story time in kindergarten. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. It's overdoing it. So there's this delicate line you have to walk between only having your voice to color and tell the story and show the emotions, but not overdoing it to the point where it's story time. Keeping it real. And I've seen so many on-camera actors come in and not be able to nail it. They just can't get it. And some who can. But that's the wonderful thing about Andrea Romano. That was a sort of a secret weapon the show had. And exactly. Andrea, a lot of people don't realize, studied to be an actress at SUNY New York, I think, in New York State. She's from Long Island originally. And then she became a casting director. Then she became a stage manager, and then she became a casting director, and then she got into animation, voice casting animators. So she understood what actors go through. She understood the process actors have to go through. And she has a great deal of respect and love for actors. And not everyone in Hollywood does. There's a lot of thinking that we're just overpaid, you-know-whats. Andrea knows how hard it is, a job to do. And I've never seen her disrespect an actor. To the point where one of these stunt actors was brought in, who shall remain nameless, a star, and he had to say, let's go back to the Get Out example again. He said, "Get out!" And Andrea said, "Okay, that's great, that's perfect. Now, we just want you're telling everyone to get out of the burning building. So really, you got to get them out of the burning building. Okay, I got it. Okay. Get out!" Perfect. Okay, now, there's 100 Nazis, and they're running into the building, and you've got to get everyone out of the burning building before the 100 Nazis come in. Okay, got it, okay. Get out! Perfect. Okay, now, there's 1,000 communists, and they're coming over the hill, and the 100 Nazis are coming up from the basement, and you've got to get the little kids out of the house before it burns down. Got it? Yeah, I got it, okay. Get out! Perfect, that was perfect, thank you so much. And I'm thinking, I didn't hear any difference between, what is going on? Am I losing my mind? And afterwards she called me over and said, "Kevin, what are you doing this afternoon?" I said, "I'm available." She said, "Good, because we have some recording for you to do." But she didn't let the person lose face. That person left thinking they'd had a good booking. So I really respect her for that. But that's an example of how, when you're used to the camera doing a lot of the work for you, you don't know how to just use your voice to do it, So it's tricky. So lots of people imitate people really well, to get back to your original point. It's about not just imitating, it's about creating the character. Because there will always be something unexpected, and that's what makes it wonderful. You know, in the middle of one of Mark's, you know, there'll be some kind of weird, you know, gasp or silence. You think, what is that? Where did that come from? But it's brilliant, you know, it just makes the character so interesting. And that's the actor. That's improvised. Those kind of things aren't scripted. And they use some and they don't use some, and you know, a lot of that's improvisational. Sure.
We're getting towards the latter half, so I'm gonna have to try and get through some more people. So
I
thank
do
you
go
very
on
much.
and on and on.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Awesome. So we're gonna try and get through a couple more people.
Okay, I'll be
until
quick.
we have time for. So right here, sir.
All right, I think I'm going to be a little bold and not ask you a Batman question.
I know, he does more than
Get him! Get him!
I actually wanted to ask you.
Get out!
Oh wait, but it's about your other work.
Perfect. Now there's more people.
I'm just kidding.
This is actually a Venture Brothers question because you also voiced Captain Sunshine.
Captain Sunshine!
I just want to know what that experience was like voicing a character who's just parodying Superman and Batman and all this stuff that you've built up for years. Just get to have fun with it. How was that?
So are you all familiar with who Captain Sunshine is? No, not everybody? Okay. I get a call in New York. Now, you know, New York is different than LA. It's a little more edgy. And the animation world is a little more edgy. And LA is very corporate. And everything's very controlled, you know. Animation started in New York. You know, cartoons were created in New York. The first cartoons were strips in the New York daily newspapers back in the 20s or 30s. So it's a very New York-centric thing. But then LA, you know, made it into a huge industry. But anyway, I get a call from this group. They want to do a character. They want the Batman voice. It's called Captain Sunshine. They book me, and I was in LA, and I'm going to be in New York the day they're recording. And I said, great, that'll be so cool. Oh, great, I love it. I didn't read the script. They told me it was a Batman-like character. They told me they wanted me to do the voice. I thought, how complicated can it be? So I booked the project. I go to the recording studio. It was in like a 10th floor of a building, and there are all these recording studios around Manhattan from the 30s and 40s that are still there. Like the Chrysler building originally had a lot of recording studios in it. Some of them are still there. They do, you know, commercial recordings in there. So this was in a building like that. So I go in, I pick up the script. I said, oh, do you have a script for me? Yes, they said. I pick up the script, I'm looking at it, I'm like, This is Captain Sunshine who's got a crush on his boy Wonder. Oh, what am I gonna do? I've also already agreed to do this. I'm at the booking. So I said to the receptionist, I said, I left something outside in my car. She said, your car? Thinking, like I was thinking, no one has cars in New York. I said, yeah, I just gotta get something. So I go downstairs, I'm on the sidewalk and I'm walking away and I think, I can't do this character. Warner Brothers is gonna kill me if I do this character. I'm walking down the sidewalk and I thought, how do I get out of this? No, wait a minute. Kevin, you're an actor. It's a wonderful character. He's funny, it's great. You're an actor, it's a character, go do it. So I turn around and I start walking back to the building and then I stopped and I thought, I am gonna get so screwed by Warner Brothers. So I turned around and I walked back away towards the subway and then I stopped and I thought, damn it, it's freedom of speech. I'm an actor, I'm gonna do the role. So I go charging back to the building, I thought, no, I can't. I went back and forth. I finally went back, I went up in the elevator, I got out, the elevator doors open, and the producers were standing there. And one of them looks at the other one and goes, you owe me $10. They had been watching me from the window, going back and forth, back and forth. Isn't that a great story? That's a great story. That's a true story.
Actually, and that brings us to the end. That's a perfect way to end, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause and a thank you to Kevin Conroy. Enjoy the rest of your Conroy everyone.
AnimeRadio.com. Subscribe.
Please make sure to like and share this video, as well as subscribe to my channel. It's the little ball in the bottom left corner of the video. All those things bring up the amount of hits, which makes it possible for me to put more videos together for you. Also, let me know what you think of everything by leaving a comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.